This video is based on a PowerPoint presentation by Glenn Spencer of American Border Patrol. It was given at the GovSec West Government Security Conference and Expo, held at the Hilton Squaw Peak Resort in Phoenix on November 15, 2011. The narration is by Glenn Spencer. American Border Patrol is a non-governmental, non-profit Arizona corporation. It operates on a ranch on the Mexican border in Arizona. It has spent the last 10 years using technology to bring the truth about the border to the American people. It pioneered the use of drones or UAVs on the border.
Don't ask him to call back.
We're in the air. We're in the air.
It has developed and tested sensor technology. It was the first to operate border cams controlled over the internet. Its Operation Beef aerial survey mapping of the border fence is the only one of its kind available. American Border Patrol is known as America's Eyes on the Border. To learn more, go to www.americanborderpatrol.com. Today we are asking the question, is it possible to grade the performance of the Border Patrol? In other words, how are they doing in securing the border? Americans want the border to be secure. Consensus runs from the President of the United States to leading members of Congress, including senators from Texas and Arizona, both border states. The senator from California, another border state, and a Democrat, places securing our borders at the top of her list of priorities. The Senate leader, also a Democrat, sees securing our borders as a bipartisan issue. Even liberal advocates for the rights of migrants agree that the border must be secured. The American people agree that we must have a secure border. The obvious question is, when will they know when it is secure? The Secretary of Homeland Security has complained that she doesn't know what Congress wants. She says they keep changing the goalposts on her. It's hard to keep score when the goalposts change. But keeping score is what is needed. During the 1997 Senate debate on amnesty, Senator Dole said we need to establish standards, metrics, and show that they have been achieved. If we are going to prepare a report card for the Border Patrol, we will need standards to judge them by. The RAND Corporation, one of America's leading think tanks, says DHS must define concrete measures of success in dealing with the border. Senator McCain has said the same thing. We need criteria on what is successful securing of our border, and we need statistics to show us it is being secured.
How much have we spent for the border? What was it, about $3 billion?
Yeah, about over three.
Over $3 billion. What's the apprehension for that period?
Well, and that's the rub. If you look at the latest performance statistics that were just issued this week, and I know the Border Patrol is working on revising this, and we've spoken to their people, and they understand the shortcomings of just having these kinds of things. But what you have is a numerator here. You have a number of apprehensions, for example, but you don't know how many people might have been there to apprehend, how many crossers were there. When you watch a baseball game, they put a batting average up, and you kind of judge how many hits you get for how many at-bats. Here, what you're getting is just the number of hits. You also have things like number of joint operations conducted, and that's a good measure, but that's an activity measure. It doesn't tell you the results of those joint operations. Percent of detected conventional aircraft. That's not a bad measure, but that's not the only measure. For example, Mr. Thompson mentioned the SBI net deployments. We were just down there last week, and we witnessed 3 ultralights coming across the border, and one buzzed the Tucson airport, we understand, and they never found anything more than that because they left camera range and the UAV was otherwise occupied, and they couldn't get a bead on it. So here's another getaway. So you have to have the numerator and the denominator to judge performance, not just the activity indicated by the numerator.
Richard Stana, a leading analyst in the Government Accountability Office, says we need to know how many people get past the Border Patrol. He says that way we can get their batting average, a sort of report card showing the numerator, the number of apprehensions, and the denominator, the number of people who crossed the border. Last year, the numerator was 447,731 apprehensions.
In the Tucson sector, was 91,000 illegal aliens were apprehended on federal lands, and the estimates are by almost every objective observer that 3 times as many get through.
Senator John McCain said that in the Tucson sector, 3 times as many people get past the Border Patrol than are apprehended. If he is right, more than 1 million people got past the Border Patrol on our southern border last year. John McCain said the Border Patrol catches 1 in 4. The head of a House subcommittee on border issues held hearings on what operational control of the border means. She said that even 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 is a failing grade. Operational control of the border has meant different things to different people. In the Secure Fence Act of 2006, still the controlling legislation, Congress called on the Secretary of Homeland Security to establish operational control of the border.
The Secure Fence Act of 2006, Congress defined operational control as the prevention of all unlawful entries into the United States, including entries by terrorists, other unlawful aliens, instruments of terrorism, narcotics, and other contraband. The CBP is publishing data stating that only 44% of the southwest border is under operational control, and a border state is suing the federal government for these same issues. What I'd like to try to get to is a further understanding from you of what operational control really means.
Congressman, I will say that part of our overall mission is to substantially increase the probability of apprehension of those people that seek to do harm to this country.
The law defined operational control as the prevention of all unlawful entries into the United States. Border Patrol success depends on the degree to which illegal entries are reduced to 0. Earlier this year, the media reported that the Department of Homeland Security did not know how many people crossed the border illegally. In March of 2011, the Rand Corporation released a study that looked at 4 ways of possibly estimating the actual number of people who crossed the border between ports of entry. These are the 4 methods they looked at. The first method, capture-recapture, calculated the number of people crossing the border in a given location based on how many of those people were actually apprehended before. The formula said that if 25% of those apprehended were repeat offenders, then if 1,000 people were apprehended, then 3,000 crossed. Another approach uses stratified sampling to set up hypothetical situations where the number of apprehensions is assumed to be proportional to the number of Border Patrol agents on patrol. Here, if there were 1,150 apprehensions, their formula calculates the total crossing at 2,400, assuming that each agent had a 100% chance of apprehension. If the apprehension chance was 80%, the number would go up to 3,000. Rand looked at another approach that used statistics of the migrant population. Illegal entries would be calculated by subtracting legal aliens from the total alien population. Rand was quick to say that this approach had very limited value. The final method for estimating total border crossers was based on indirect methods of estimating illegal crossers using complex mathematical models. Rand says this complex method has yet to be tried and could use heretofore unused data, or updated estimates of capture-recapture might be used. They question its validity. All of the methods examined by Rand fell short of doing the job. Rand suggested physically sampling the actual number of people crossing the border. They said this could be done using airplanes and ground cameras. A year before the Rand report appeared, American Border Patrol had set out to do just that.
A Border Watch group is going high-tech to figure out exactly how many people are illegally crossing the border. The American Border Patrol is raising money for a plan to put up hidden cameras and sensors along a stretch of the border. News 4's Ed Tribble shows us what they're doing in tonight's 4 on the Border investigation.
ABP examined a number of ways to count border crossers, all of which it had experience using on the border. ABP began using internet-based border cams 6 years ago. It was a pioneer in this technology. In 2008, one of ABP's cameras on the border helped apprehend more than 1,500 people while being operated from Texas.
Virtual vigilance oversees the Mexico border, not the entire 2,000 miles, and it's not the Border Patrol, not Homeland Security. These images were captured by a mobile unit on loan to a group known as the American Border Patrol. The Night Beat's Jesse Deviado talks to one of its volunteers using another camera to watch from afar.
He was more than 500 miles away.
I had 7 Border Patrol agents on horseback, 10 on the ground walking, and a helicopter out there.
Chasing illegal immigrants crossing a ranch on the Arizona border. All it took were phone calls from virtual volunteer Bob Parker. It says he's been busy.
1,500 people and 5 loads of drugs.
From Canyon Lake.
From Canyon Lake.
From his armchair.
It does make it much easier, you know.
Today, border cams are in use in Texas in a system called the Blue Servo. More than 30 cameras are operated by Texas officials, while citizens look on. While well-intentioned, independent observers have documented numerous problems with Blue Servo and suggests fatigue on the part of operators or the complete lack of operators. Human limitations greatly limit the utility of border cameras. The problem has been well documented with the Border Patrol and the Texas Blue Servo system. ABP has used trail cameras for years with good results. As a means of producing an accurate count, trail cameras have severe limitations. There are just too many trails and not enough places to hide cameras. American Border Patrol has been performing aerial surveillance for years and has photographed many suspected border intruders. Our experience is that when people hear an airplane, they hide, making it difficult to count them. And flight restrictions placed on drones or UAVs greatly limit their usefulness for counting. ABP has used standalone ground sensors for years, but their limited range and need for battery power precludes their use for comprehensive counting. American Border Patrol tested a long-range thermal sensor system, but the slightest movement set it off, creating many false alarms. Hearing of ABP's quest for a method to count people who crossed the border, a small Arizona company came up with a new idea. It thought it could link ground sensors together using digital converters and power the system with solar energy. The company raised private funds to develop the idea, and it did work. American Border Patrol installed it on its ranch. ABP has been testing the system for nearly a year. We found that it has a detection range of more than 300 feet and can distinguish between people and other things such as airplanes and animals. The system is comprised of a buried cable that connects sensors every 240 feet along the line. An algorithm works effectively at 300 feet. One of the test subjects carried a portable... Power is supplied by solar panels every quarter of a mile, although this may be stretched to 1 mile depending on future developments. When movement is detected, the system's algorithm produces a report on the source. In other words, was it human, aircraft, animal, tunnel, etc. The computer housing the algorithm handles 5 miles of sensors. It is buried. Above ground, an antenna sends the text message along the line while a solar panel powers the computer. Reports from the sonic barrier are sent via commercial satellite out to an internet host. One satellite antenna can handle up to 85 miles of sensors. When a contact is detected, an alarm is sent to the home website together with an updated probability estimate every 30 seconds. The great range of the sensors allows the algorithm to update its estimates as more data comes in. In other words, as people start walking toward the line. When the line is crossed, a count is given. The sensor line could be continuous all along the entire border, making it possible to count everyone who crosses. You cannot tiptoe across this line. Preliminary estimates suggest that the entire U.S.-Mexico border could be covered by the sonic barrier for less than what Boeing spent trying to secure 51 miles in Arizona. A report card for the Border Patrol would be prepared by defining border security and then measuring it. Under President Eisenhower, apprehensions along the border were reduced from 1 million to about 30,000. In those days, the Border Patrol had little more than 1,000 agents. Today there are 20,000 agents, and we have better technology and border infrastructures. Once achieved and maintained for, say, 24 months, we would say that the border is secure. If a number such as 20,000 can be agreed to, the next step would be to count the, quote, gotaways, unquote. This would be done by counting everyone who crosses the border and then subtracting how many were apprehended. The results would be shared with border state governors. Once it is established that the border is secure, Congress could proceed with a full and open debate over the treatment of persons who remain in the country illegally. There is a consensus that the border must be secured. A consensus is needed as to what border security is. There is a general agreement among experts that we need a metric for border security. The Department of Homeland Security does not know how many people enter illegally. We now have the means to measure border crossers, the sonic barrier. We propose that the metric be no more than 20,000 people entering illegally, and that level be maintained for 2 years.
In closing, as CBP and the Border Patrol continue to refine new performance measures, it is important to be mindful of the key attributes of successful performance measurement. These attributes include linking measures to goals, missions, and core activities.
The approach proposed here does link measures to goals.
Assuring clarity and consistency in definition and measurement.
The approach has clear definitions and measurements.
Employing numerical targets.
The approach has numerical targets.
Being reasonably free of significant bias and manipulation.
The results would be available to state governors for independent assessment.
recognizing each component's contribution to the overall progress and producing reliable results.
The reliability of the border counting system would be well established before it is implemented all along the border. Is it possible to prepare a report card for the Border Patrol? The answer is yes.